What Gloria Gaither shared this week did not sound like the kind of update people have grown used to hearing when a public figure faces a health crisis. It carried a different tone, something heavier, more deliberate, and shaped as much by what was left unsaid as by what was spoken clearly. When she addressed the gospel community about Bill Gaither being rushed to the hospital, her words did not feel like a prepared statement filtered through layers of management or public relations. Instead, they felt personal, grounded, and deeply reflective of a life built on faith rather than performance. For those who have followed the Gaither family for decades, there was an immediate sense that this moment wasn't ordinary, and the way it was being handled confirmed that feeling. The care in her language, the restraint, and the quiet strength behind it all suggested that something deeper was unfolding beneath the surface of a simple medical update. Bill Gaither's name has long stood at the center of Southern gospel music, not just as a songwriter or performer, but as a figure who helped shape the emotional and spiritual lives of millions. His music has carried people through grief, uncertainty, and moments when faith felt fragile. So when news spread that he had been hospitalized, it did not travel like typical celebrity news. It moved through the gospel community in a much more intimate way, almost like word passing through a family. Gloria's decision to speak directly added weight to the situation, and her message quickly became something people returned to, reading between the lines, searching for meaning not just in what she said, but in how she said it. From the very beginning, the Gaither story has never been about fame or recognition. Bill was born in a small Indiana town where faith was not a concept, but a way of life, and music was simply one of the ways people expressed that faith. It was never about building a career in the traditional sense. It was about connection, about something shared between people, and something offered upward in belief. When Gloria came into his life, what formed between them was not only a marriage, but a creative partnership that would leave a lasting mark on Christian music. Together, they wrote songs that did more than describe faith. They carried it, gave it language, and placed it into the lives of listeners across generations. One of their most well-known songs, written during a particularly uncertain season in their lives, came from a place of real vulnerability. Gloria has spoken before about writing while pregnant, facing a world that felt unstable and uncertain. That honesty, that willingness to write from within the struggle rather than above it, became part of what made their music resonate so deeply. It was never distant or abstract. It was rooted in lived experience, in moments where faith was not easy but necessary. Over the years, the homecoming gatherings became one of the most recognizable expressions of that philosophy. What started as a simple, informal recording grew into something far greater than anyone could have predicted. These were not just performances. They were reunions, spaces where artists who had been overlooked or set aside were invited back into the spotlight with dignity and respect. Bill created an environment where legacy mattered, where voices that had shaped the genre were not forgotten simply because trends had changed. He reached out personally, inviting people back, not as a business move, but as an act of restoration. That spirit is part of what makes this moment feel so significant. As news of his hospitalization spread, the response did not come through official channels first. It came through relationships. Artists who had worked with him, learned from him, and been given opportunities by him began reaching out to one another. There was a sense of shared concern, but also of gratitude as people reflected on what he had meant in their lives. This network of connection, built over decades, is perhaps one of the clearest reflections of his legacy. What stood out most in Gloria's statement was its authenticity. There was no attempt to soften reality with empty optimism, nor was there a sense of fear-driven urgency. Instead, there was honesty. She acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, while also expressing a genuine call for prayer, not as a formality, but as something she truly believed in. That balance is not easy to strike, and it revealed something important about the foundation of their lives together. This was not faith as performance. It was faith as practice, something lived daily and relied upon in moments exactly like this. One particular detail in her words has stayed with many people who heard it. She described Bill as being at peace, not in a way that suggested resignation, and not in a way that implied giving up, but in a way that reflected a deep sense of trust. It is the kind of peace that comes from a life lived with purpose, from a belief that whatever happens is held within something greater. For those familiar with the language and culture of gospel music, that description carries a weight that is difficult to explain, but immediately understood. Looking back at his career, it becomes clear that Bill Gaither's influence extends far beyond his own work. The vocal group he formed became a place where artists grew, not just in skill, but in understanding. Many who passed through it went on to have significant careers of their own, but they carried with them a perspective that shaped how they approached music. It was never just about the performance. It was about the message, about the connection between the song and the listener. That idea, as simple as it sounds, runs counter to much of the entertainment industry, where attention and approval often take priority. The Homecoming series itself reflected that difference. It did not rely on elaborate production or polished perfection. Instead, it focused on authenticity, on capturing moments that felt real rather than staged. Audiences responded to that in a powerful way, and the series became one of the most successful in Christian music history. But its success cannot be explained by numbers alone. What drew people in was the sense of sincerity, the feeling that what they were watching was not manufactured, but genuine. As the community now waits, there is a different kind of reflection taking place. When someone has been active and present for so long, it is easy to take their presence for granted. Moments like this shift that perspective. They invite people to consider not just what someone has done, but what they have meant. Bill's contributions span decades, from songwriting to producing to creating spaces where others could be seen and heard. Yet those who know him personally often speak most about his roles outside of music, as a husband, a father, and a member of his church. There are also questions that naturally arise in times like this. People wonder about the future, about what happens to something so closely associated with one individual. The homecoming gatherings, the recordings, the ongoing projects all represent a structure that continues to exist, but the spirit behind them is something more intangible. It was built over time, shaped by choices and values that cannot be easily replicated. Whether that spirit continues in the same way is something that cannot be answered quickly, and perhaps should not be. What remains certain is that the impact of his work has already extended far beyond anything that could be confined to one lifetime. The songs themselves have taken on lives of their own, sung in churches, in homes, in moments of joy and in moments of grief. They belong now to the people who have found comfort in them. That kind of legacy is not dependent on circumstances. It continues, carried forward by those who have received it. For those who have followed this journey over the years, this moment is not only about concern for health. It is about recognizing the depth of what has been built and the way it has touched countless lives. It is about sitting in that awareness without rushing to conclusions, on allowing space for both hope and honesty. The same authenticity that defined the music now shapes the way this moment is being faced. In the end, what Gloria shared was more than an update. It was a reflection of a life lived with intention, of a partnership rooted in faith, and of a community that has grown around something real. And as people continue to watch, to pray, and to reflect, they are not just responding to a situation. They are responding to a legacy that has been woven into their own stories in ways that will continue, regardless of what comes next.